The security log didn't make sense. Staff Sergeant David Mitchell had been reviewing entrance records for the palace's private storage levels, something he did every Tuesday morning as part of his routine checks. Everything was normal until he reached the entries for Vault 7. 3 visits in the last month, all late at night, all authorized by the same person, Queen Camilla. Mitchell stared at the screen. Vault 7 was special, not because of what it contained. Most people assumed it held old furniture or forgotten paintings. It was special because of who had access. Queen Elizabeth had designated it as a restricted vault before her death. Only senior members of the Royal Collection Trust were supposed to enter, and only with proper documentation. The late Queen had been specific about that. 3 visits, no documentation. No witnesses, no Royal Collection staff present. Mitchell had been a Royal Guard for 8 years, with 3 tours in Afghanistan before that. He'd learned to trust his instincts, and right now, every instinct was telling him something was wrong. He pulled up the access codes. Each entry had been made using an override authorization, the kind that bypassed normal security protocols, the kind that required someone with significant authority. He printed the log and walked down the corridor toward the security office, his footsteps echoing on marble floors that had been polished that morning. The palace was quiet. Tuesday mornings usually were, with most of the family at various engagements. That's why he'd noticed the pattern. The vault visits had all been on Tuesday mornings too. Captain Richard Wells looked up when Mitchell entered. Wells was former Special Forces, 20 years in the military before taking the commander position at the palace. He had a reputation for being thorough and absolutely uncompromising when it came to security protocols. "Sir, I need to show you something." Wells took the printout and studied it. His expression didn't change, but Mitchell saw his jaw tighten slightly. That small tell meant Wells saw the same problem he did. "Vault 7, Wells said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. 3 unauthorized visits, all using override codes." Wells set the paper down and leaned back in his chair. "You know what's in Vault 7? I was told it contains items from Queen Elizabeth's private collection, items she wanted preserved but not displayed." "That's correct." Wells stood and walked to the window, looking out at the palace grounds. After Her Late Majesty passed, there was an inventory conducted, standard procedure. The Royal Collection Trust documented everything in the main vaults. Vault 7 was supposed to be included in that inventory. Supposed to be? It was postponed, at the request of someone very senior. Wells turned back to face Mitchell. The official reason was that it contained personal items that needed more sensitive handling. A delay of a few months was considered appropriate out of respect. Mitchell understood what Wells wasn't saying directly. Someone had blocked the inventory. Someone with enough authority that people had simply accepted the decision. "Sir, I'd like permission to inspect Vault 7. Wells was quiet for a long moment. "If you do this, you need to be absolutely certain. We're not talking about checking a supply closet. We're talking about opening a vault that someone very powerful has been accessing in secret." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Wells stepped closer. "Because if you're wrong, your career ends today. And if you're right, things get a lot more complicated." Mitchell had thought about this on the walk to Wells's office. He'd played out both scenarios in his mind, but he kept coming back to one thing: Queen Elizabeth's specific instructions about that vault. She'd been careful about everything, deliberate. If she'd wanted Camilla to have access, she would have documented it properly. "I need to see what's in there, sir." Wells studied him for another moment, then nodded. "Get your equipment. I'll meet you at the vault in 10 minutes. And Mitchell, we document everything, every step, clear video and photographic evidence." "Yes, sir. But before we get into what they found in that vault, make sure you're subscribed to Crown Watch. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Now, Back to the story. Mitchell retrieved his security kit and a portable camera system. He also grabbed Inspector Sarah Chen from the Metropolitan Police Palace Liaison Office. If they were going to do this, they needed an independent witness, someone outside the military chain of command who could verify what they found. Chen was in her early 40s, serious and professional. She'd worked palace security for 6 years and had a reputation for being absolutely by the book. When Mitchell explained what they were doing, her expression went carefully neutral. "You're sure about this?" "No," Mitchell said honestly, "but the access logs are irregular. We need to verify the vault's contents. And if someone very senior objects, then we follow protocol and document that objection as well." Chen grabbed her own camera and evidence kit. "Let's go." Vault 7 was located in the lower level of the palace, down a corridor that most staff never entered. The walls here were older, original stone from when this section of the palace had been built centuries ago. The lighting was modern but sparse, LED fixtures every 20 feet, casting pools of white light broken by stretches of shadow. Wells was already there, standing in front of a heavy steel door that looked as distinctly out of place against the historical architecture. The vault itself had been installed in the 1980s, part of a security upgrade after several high-profile thefts from royal properties. "Inspector Chen," Wells acknowledged her with a nod. "Good thinking, Mitchell." The door had 3 separate locks. One was a traditional key mechanism, one was a digital code pad, and one was a biometric scanner. Wells had brought the key, a heavy brass piece kept in the security office. He also had the access codes that would open the digital lock. The biometric scanner requires either the monarch's fingerprint or authorization from the Lord Chamberlain, Wells explained. But there's an override for security purposes. He pulled out a small electronic device and connected it to a port below the scanner. This logs the override and sends notification to the Lord Chamberlain's office. They'll know we're doing this within about 5 minutes. Mitchell felt his pulse quicken. 5 minutes. They had 5 minutes before someone in authority knew they were opening this vault. If Camilla had staff monitoring those notifications, they'd have even less time. Wells entered the key and turned it. A heavy clunk echoed through the corridor. Then he typed a 12-digit code into the keypad. Another clunk. Finally, he activated the override device. The biometric scanner's light changed from red to green. The door was thick, at least 6 inches of reinforced steel. Wells pulled the handle, and it swung open with surprising smoothness, revealing darkness beyond. Mitchell reached for the light switch inside the entrance, but Wells caught his arm. "Camera first. Document the darkness, then document what the lights reveal." Chen had already started recording. Mitchell did the same with his camera. They captured the dark entrance. The empty doorway, the complete lack of any visible disturbance. Then Mitchell flipped at the switch. Fluorescent lights flickered on, revealing a room about 20 feet square. The walls were lined with storage shelves, all empty. In the center of the room sat a single table, and on that table, 3 items. Mitchell's breath caught. He'd seen those items before, not in person, but in photographs, in historical documentation, in the records of Queen Elizabeth's coronation. The first was a crown, not a large elaborate piece like the imperial state crown that everyone had seen in photographs. This was smaller, more delicate. Gold filigree work formed a circle of leaves and flowers, with small diamonds set at each junction. The design was Victorian, elegant and understated. "Queen Victoria's small diamond crown," Wells said quietly. "Her Majesty wore it for the 1953 coronation procession, before the ceremony itself." Mitchell moved closer, careful not to touch anything. The crown sat on a velvet cushion, perfectly positioned. The gold caught the fluorescent light, and the diamonds sparkled with cold fire. Up close, he could see the incredible detail of the metalwork. Each leaf had tiny veins etched into it. Each flower petal was shaped individually. This wasn't mass production. This was craftsmanship from an era when royal jewelers spent months on a single piece. But it wasn't the crown that made Mitchell's hands shake slightly as he adjusted his camera. It was where the crown was, not in the royal collection, properly catalogued and protected, not in the Tower of London with the other crown jewels. Here, in a secret vault, accessible only to someone who'd been visiting in the middle of the night. The second item was a document case, leather, aged to a deep brown, with the royal seal embossed on the cover. Wells opened it carefully, revealing papers inside. Letters, written in Queen Elizabeth's distinctive handwriting. Chen leaned in to photograph the documents. These are addressed to Princess Anne. Wells carefully lifted the first letter. His face was unreadable as he scanned the contents, but Mitchell saw his grip tighten on the paper. These are the late Queen's final instructions regarding the distribution of her personal collection. Wells looked at Mitchell. Instructions that were never delivered to Princess Anne. The third item was smaller, a jewellery box, black leather, with gold clasps. Inside, on white silk, lay a brooch. The design was simple, a spray of diamonds forming a flower, with a single large sapphire at the centre. But Mitchell recognised it immediately. Queen Elizabeth had worn that brooch constantly in her final years. It had been her mother's, passed down through 3 generations of queens. The Queen Mother's sapphire brooch, Chen said softly. Her Majesty wore this at Prince Philip's funeral. Mitchell stepped back and took in the full scene. 3 items, 3 pieces of Queen Elizabeth's personal history, all of them significant, all of them valuable, all of them supposed to be in the royal collection or designated for specific family members, all of them hidden in a vault that only Camilla had been accessing. His mind went back to his training. 3 tours in Afghanistan had taught him to assess situations quickly, to see patterns, to understand what physical evidence was telling him. This wasn't random. The items were too carefully selected. The crown from Elizabeth's coronation, the letters with her final wishes, the brooch she'd worn at her husband's funeral. These weren't forgotten items. These were being hidden, deliberately. We need to document everything, Wells said. Every angle, close-ups of the documents, serial numbers, if there are any. And then, we need to secure this vault and report what we've found. To whom? Chen asked. The King is in Scotland. The Princess Royal is at an engagement. The Prince of Wales is in Birmingham. Wells pulled out his phone. We report it to the Lord Chamberlain first, protocol, and then... He paused. Then we wait for instructions. But they didn't have to wait long. Mitchell was photographing the crown from another angle when he heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Fast footsteps. Multiple people. He glanced at Wells, who'd heard them too. That was faster than 5 minutes, Wells said quietly. A woman's voice echoed down the corridor. Captain Wells, step away from that vault immediately. Lady Amanda Forsyth appeared in the doorway. She was the Queen's private secretary, appointed by Camilla shortly after the coronation. In her 50s, impeccably dressed, with the kind of cold authority that came from years of managing royal affairs. Behind her stood 2 palace security guards Mitchell didn't recognize. New hires, probably. The kind who hadn't been around long enough to develop loyalty to anything except their paycheck. Lady Forsyth, Wells said calmly, we're conducting a routine security inspection. There's nothing routine about breaking into a private royal vault without authorization. We have authorization. Security protocols allow for vault inspections when access logs show irregularities. Lady Forsyth's expression didn't change. That vault contains personal items belonging to Her Majesty the Queen. Items that are none of your concern. These items belong to the royal collection, Chen said, gesturing at the crown. They're national treasures, not personal property. Inspector Chen, I suggest you remember your place. You're here as a liaison, not as an investigator. Mitchell watched the exchange carefully. Lady Forsyth was trying to intimidate them into backing down. She was used to people following orders without question. But she'd made a miscalculation. She'd brought security guards instead of senior officials. That meant she was acting quickly, possibly without authorization from anyone else. "Ma'am," Mitchell said, keeping his voice respectful but firm, "we've documented the contents of this vault. That documentation is already being uploaded to secure servers. The appropriate authorities will need to be notified." Lady Forsyth's eyes narrowed. "Sergeant Mitchell, is it? I'll make sure your commanding officers hear about this insubordination." "I'm following proper security protocols, ma'am." "You're interfering with royal property." Wells stepped forward. "Lady Forsyth, with respect, I think we need to pause this conversation until more senior officials are present. The items in this vault include Queen Victoria's small diamond crown, which has significant historical value. It should be in the royal collection, not in a private vault. The Queen has every right to store items from her personal collection as she sees fit." "This wasn't her personal collection," Chen said. "These items were part of Queen Elizabeth's estate. They should have been inventoried and processed according to her wishes." Lady Forsyth took a step into the vault. The two security guards followed her. Mitchell noticed they both had hands on their radios. They were waiting for orders. "I'm instructing you all to leave this vault now. The contents will be secured, and this matter will be handled through proper channels." "Which channels?" Wells asked. "Because proper channels would involve the Royal Collection Trust, the Lord Chamberlain, and likely the Princess Royal, since these appear to be items specifically designated for her in Queen Elizabeth's will." That hit home. Lady Forsyth's controlled expression cracked slightly. "You don't know what you're talking about?" "Then explain it to us," Mitchell said. "Help us understand why Queen Victoria's coronation crown is hidden in a vault instead of being properly preserved and displayed." For a moment, Lady Forsyth seemed to consider it. Then, her expression hardened again. "Remove them," she told the security guards. The two men moved forward. Mitchell didn't step back. He'd been in tighter situations than this, facing armed insurgents in Afghanistan. Two palace security guards weren't going to intimidate him into abandoning evidence. But Wells put a hand on his shoulder. "Stand down, Sergeant." Mitchell looked at his commander, confused. They had the evidence. They'd documented everything. Why back down now? Wells met his eyes, and Mitchell saw something there. Not surrender. Strategy. "We'll leave the vault," Wells said to Lady Forsyth, "but I'm placing a formal security hold on these items. Nothing is to be moved without documentation and proper authorization from the Royal Collection Trust." "You don't have authority to place holds on royal property." "I have authority to protect national treasures that may be at risk. That crown is worth millions of pounds and has immeasurable historical value. Until the proper authorities can assess the situation, it stays under guard." Lady Forsyth's jaw tightened. "Captain Wells, you're making a serious mistake." "Perhaps. But I'd rather make a mistake out of caution than fail in my duty to protect the nation's heritage." They left the vault, but Wells stationed two guards outside, men he trusted with years of service. Mitchell saw Lady Forsyth's expression as they walked away. She'd won the immediate confrontation, but she knew the real battle was just beginning. Back in the security office, Wells pulled up the footage they'd recorded. The crown, the letters, the brooch, all clearly documented. "Send copies to 3 locations," Wells told Chen. "The Royal Collection Trust, the Lord Chamberlain's office, and Princess Anne's private secretary. Mark them urgent and confidential." "That's going to create a significant problem," Chen said. "Good, because we need people asking questions before anything disappears." Mitchell understood now. Wells had retreated from the vault not because he was backing down, but because he needed to ensure the evidence was distributed. As long as Lady Forsyth thought she'd intimidated them into silence, she'd move slower. But the moment those emails reached their destinations, everything would change. It took 40 minutes for Princess Anne to respond. Mitchell was reviewing the footage again when Wells's phone rang. The conversation was brief, but Mitchell saw Wells's expression shift from tense to something close to satisfaction. "The Princess Royal is returning to London immediately," Wells said after hanging up. "She wants to see the vault personally, and she's bringing someone from the Royal Collection Trust." "What about Camilla?" Chen asked. "The king has been notified. He's apparently on a call with the Queen now." Wells allowed himself a small smile. "I suspect that conversation is not going well." 2 hours later, Princess Anne arrived at the palace in a car that moved faster than protocol usually allowed. She was known for her no-nonsense approach to royal duties and her absolute dedication to her mother's legacy. If anyone would fight to protect Queen Elizabeth's wishes, it was Anne. With her was Dr. Margaret Thornton, the chief curator of the Royal Collection. Dr. Thornton was in her 60s, with 30 years of experience cataloguing royal treasures. She looked furious. Mitchell led them to Vault 7. Lady Forsyth had disappeared, probably reporting to Camilla about the situation. The 2 guards Wells had posted were still at their positions. "Captain Wells," Princess Anne said as she approached. "Show me." Wells opened the vault using the same override process. This time, they didn't need to document the darkness. Anne strode in like she owned the place, which, in a sense, she did. This was her mother's property, her family's legacy. She stopped in front of the crown. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Then she reached out and touched one of the delicate gold leaves, her fingers gentle. "My mother wore this on her coronation day," Anne said quietly. "Before the ceremony. She always said it was her favorite crown because it was comfortable, because it reminded her of her grandmother." She turned to Dr. Thornton. "This should be in the royal collection." "It absolutely should." Dr. Thornton was examining the document case. "Your Majesty, these letters, these are the late Queen's instructions for distribution of her personal items. I was told these had been lost. We searched for months." "Lost?" Anne's voice was dangerously calm. "Or hidden?" "The letters specifically designate certain items for you," Dr. Thornton continued, "including this crown, the brooch, and several other pieces. They were supposed to be transferred to you immediately after the mourning period." Anne picked up the jewelry box with the sapphire brooch. "My grandmother's brooch. My mother wore this at my father's funeral." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. "She wanted me to have this. She told me so, 2 weeks before she died." Mitchell felt something tighten in his chest. This wasn't about money or even about historical treasures. This was about a daughter trying to honor her mother's final wishes, only to find someone had stolen them. "Who had access to this vault?" Anne asked Wells. "According to our logs, only Queen Camilla. 3 visits in the last month, all late at night." Anne's expression went cold. "I see." She pulled out her phone and made a call. "Yes, it's me. I need you at the palace now. Vault 7, lower level. It's important." She paused. "I don't care if you're in Birmingham. Get here now." Prince William arrived an hour later, still in the suit from his morning engagement. When he saw the contents of the vault, his face went red. "Are you telling me Camilla's been hiding our grandmother's crown? The letters? All of it?" "That appears to be the case," Anne said. "And she was going to what? Keep it? Sell it?" "We don't know yet, but we're going to find out." King Charles arrived that evening. Mitchell wasn't present for that meeting. It happened in the King's private study, with only Anne, William, and Camilla present. But the palace staff talked. They always did. And what Mitchell heard was that it had been ugly. Camilla had apparently tried to claim she was preserving the items for safekeeping, that she'd been planning to donate them to the royal collection, but wanted to catalogue them properly first. that there had been a miscommunication about the letters. Anne hadn't believed a word of it. Neither had William. And Charles, caught between his wife and his family, had apparently made the only choice he could. The next morning, Dr. Thornton and her team arrived to properly remove the items from Vault 7. Mitchell was assigned to provide security during the transfer. He watched as they carefully packaged the crown in protective foam, secured the documents in an archival case, and wrapped the brooch in acid-free tissue. "Sergeant Mitchell," Dr. Thornton said as they worked, "I understand you're the one who noticed the access irregularities." "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you. If you hadn't been paying attention, these items might have disappeared permanently. The crown alone is worth over £2 million, but its historical value is incalculable. Queen Victoria wore it. Queen Elizabeth wore it. It's part of our national heritage." Mitchell had been trained not to show emotion on duty, but he felt a surge of satisfaction. This was why he'd become a guard. Not for the ceremony or the uniform, but to protect things that mattered. Princess Anne spoke to him privately later that day. She'd requested a meeting in the security office, just the two of them. "Sergeant Mitchell, I've reviewed your service record. 8 years as a Royal Guard, exemplary performance. 3 tours in Afghanistan before that." "Yes, ma'am." "Captain Wells tells me you showed considerable courage in pushing this investigation forward. You knew there would be consequences." "I was following protocol, ma'am." Anne's expression softened slightly. "We both know it was more than that. Protocol gives you permission to investigate. Courage makes you actually do it when you know powerful people will be angry." She handed him a sealed envelope. "This is a formal commendation. It will be placed in. I've also recommended you for a position in my personal security detail, should you choose to accept it." Mitchell was surprised. Anne's security detail was small and highly selective. It was considered one of the most prestigious positions in royal protection. "I'm honored, ma'am." "You should be. I need people around me who understand that duty means protecting what matters, not just protecting the powerful." She paused. "My mother built her entire reign on that principle. She understood that the monarchy exists to serve the nation, not the other way around. These items you found, they're not just jewels and papers. They're symbols of that service." "I understand, ma'am. I hope you do, because what happened here, someone stealing from my mother's memory, hiding her final wishes, that can never happen again. We need guards who will stand up and say something when they see something wrong." After Anne left, Mitchell sat at his desk and opened the envelope. Inside was a formal commendation signed by both Anne and William, but there was also a handwritten note. "Sergeant Mitchell, my mother would have appreciated what you did. Thank you for protecting her legacy. Anne." Mitchell put the note back in the envelope carefully. In his 8 years as a guard, he'd received plenty of official recognition. Medals, commendations, formal certificates. But this handwritten thank you from a grieving daughter meant more than all of them combined. The official statement from the palace came 2 days later. It was carefully worded, designed to provide information without creating scandal. Several items from Queen Elizabeth II's personal collection have been located and will be transferred to the Royal Collection Trust for proper preservation and display. The Royal Family. Thanks the palace security team for their diligence in protecting the nation's heritage. No mention of the vault, no mention of Camilla, no mention of the hidden letters. The palace was expert at managing information, at protecting the institution, even when individuals within it had failed. But Mitchell heard the unofficial story from Captain Wells. Camilla's access to restricted vaults had been permanently revoked. An independent audit was being conducted of all royal storage areas, and most significantly, Princess Anne had been given oversight authority for all items from Queen Elizabeth's estate. The crown went on display at the Royal Collection 3 weeks later. Mitchell took his niece to see it on his day off. She was 9 years old and obsessed with princesses. "That crown is tiny," she said, looking at it through the protective glass. "Queen Victoria was a small woman," Mitchell explained. "She had it made to fit her perfectly. And Queen Elizabeth wore it too, on her coronation day, before the main ceremony." His niece pressed closer to the glass. "It's pretty, all those little diamonds." Mitchell thought about that night in the vault, about the way the fluorescent lights had caught those same diamonds, about how close this piece of history had come to disappearing forever. "It is pretty," he agreed. "But more importantly, it's safe now." They walked through the rest of the exhibition, past portraits of past queens and displays of royal regalia. His niece chattered about which crown was her favourite, which dress was the most beautiful, which jewel sparkled the most, and Mitchell let her talk, content to just listen and watch her excitement. This was why it mattered, not because of the monetary value or even the historical significance, but because these items connected people to their history. They made the past real and tangible. They reminded everyone that queens and kings were people too, people who wore crowns that were too heavy and wrote letters to their daughters and cherished brooches from their mothers. Later that night, Mitchell sat in his flat and thought about everything that had happened. He'd joined the military at 18, looking for purpose and direction. He'd served in Afghanistan, protecting his fellow soldiers and doing his duty. He'd become a royal guard, thinking it would be ceremonial and safe after years of combat. But in the end, the most important thing he'd protected wasn't a person. It was memory. It was legacy. It was a daughter's right to receive her mother's final gifts. He pulled out the note from Princess Anne and read it again. "My mother would have appreciated what you did." Mitchell had never met Queen Elizabeth in any meaningful way. He'd stood guard while she passed through corridors. He'd seen her from a distance during ceremonies, but he'd never spoken to her, never received any personal acknowledgement. Yet, in that vault, looking at her crown and her letters and her brooch, he'd felt connected to her in a way that surprised him. She'd been a woman who understood duty, who'd spent 70 years serving her nation, who'd been deliberate and careful about everything, including her final wishes. And someone had tried to steal from her, not just her possessions, but her intentions, her legacy. Mitchell folded the note and put it back in his desk drawer. Tomorrow he'd return to his regular duties, standing guard, reviewing security logs, conducting routine inspections, the same work he'd been doing for 8 years. But now he knew something he hadn't fully understood before. Being a guard wasn't about standing still and looking impressive. It was about paying attention, about noticing when something was wrong, about having the courage to speak up, even when powerful people wanted silence. Royal guards aren't just ceremonial. They're the last line of defense for a nation's history and traditions. When everyone else looks away, they keep watching. When everyone else stays silent, they speak up. Mitchell had learned that lesson in a windowless vault, standing in front of a stolen crown, and he'd never forget it. If this story showed you something about the Royal Guards you didn't know, hit that subscribe button. We share these stories every day at the same time. Tomorrow we'll tell you about what happened when Camilla tried to alter Queen Elizabeth's will. You won't believe how it ended. Drop a comment and let us know. Should Camilla face criminal charges for hiding these royal treasures? We'll see you tomorrow.